Hi, thanks today for tuning in to TV2 and Front Porch Conversations. I'm going to be visiting this morning with Joe and Eleanore Catarious, and it's great to have you here on the porch this morning.
Thank you.
Joe and Eleanor have both lived at the village for a number of years, but we'll get into that. And many of you will recognize Eleanor as our coordinator of volunteers, a position she's held for how many years?
15 or 16?
15 or 16, yes.
I've been here 16, so much 15.
And I'll have to say that it's been my pleasure to work with you for many of those years.
Thank you.
But I am enjoying retirement now.
I'm sure.
And Joe has done a lot of volunteer work around the village, has at one point also worked for the village, but we'll get into more about that. But I just wanted to introduce you in that way to people. Joe and Eleanor, where were you each born?
I was born in Philadelphia.
Me too.
And both of you grew up there, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
In a lot of our Front Porch Conversations, I've never had a couple that were both grew up in a large city, I don't believe that I can recall. So tell us what was life like in a big city growing up, and what was your special memories of that?
Well, a lot of row homes. A lot of row homes. Transportation within 4 or 5 blocks from wherever you lived. And at that time, it was the city of brotherly love. It was clean. The people were just nice. And it was a great place, truly.
Do you have a special memory of something you really enjoyed doing, or with family or friends?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Joe, what about you?
I grew up in Philadelphia. We lived in a section called Wissanomi. It was a rented house back in the turn of the century, last century. Philadelphia had made a master plan of their city and had designated major roads where houses were in their way, and they didn't do that program until the late 50s, basically late 50s. But they rented these houses, and we lived in a twin home that my parents rented for $11 a month.
Exorbitant.
Exorbitant rate. And that house eventually, we had to move when we were in, my twin brother and I, and younger brother, when we were 12 years old, which makes it 1950. Mm-hmm. And so we moved to another section of Philadelphia called Fox Chase, and then moved a year later to Somerton, on the edge of the city in the northeast section of Montgomery and Bucks County joined together.
Do you have a favorite childhood memory?
Meeting Eleanore.
All right. Good answer, Joe.
That gives me good points.
And when did that happen, Eleanor?
That happened when we were in 8th grade.
I don't remember that.
It was English class. The teacher put him next to me so that he would pay more attention to what she was saying and whatever he was doing.
Not paying attention to you?
I wasn't paying attention to her. She didn't look like a beagle hound.
Oh, my goodness.
And as we go through Joe's story, dogs have been an important part of your life, haven't they?
Absolutely.
But so has Eleanor.
Yes, absolutely.
So from the 8th grade, what happened next in your relationship?
Well, in 9th grade, Joe transferred to a VOTEC school in Philadelphia, and I remained at Lincoln High School. I started there in 7th grade, and it was a brand new school, and we went through all the way to 12th at that point. And lo and behold, in about the end of 11th grade, he returned, and the rest is history. The rest is history.
And Joe, what do you remember about meeting Eleanor again?
She walked past me in the lunchroom, and it was a bet that said, I bet you go and talk to her, my buddy, one of my buddies. And so I talked to her, and we started dating. We went to a dance at a ballroom. Typical 50s romance.
And so we know the end of the story, but let's talk a little bit more about
how we got there.
Yes.
Well, he went into the Navy right from high school, and I waited patiently for 3 years for him to return, and I didn't let him I didn't let him be single too long.
After
Within 2 months, we were walking down another aisle, yes. So we were married in April of 1959.
Bless your little heart.
Yes.
And Joe, I know that you spent time with the Navy and they sent you lots of places.
Yes. After high school, we graduated in January of '56. And the draft was active in those days. And so college wasn't ready for me. And I went in the Navy and to avoid the draft and spent 3 years in the Caribbean, North Atlantic, Mediterranean, Persian Gulf, Red Sea, Indian Ocean, from Kenya to Kuwait to Saudi Arabia to Greece and Ireland, Barbados, Jamaica, Cuba. Those are some of the places that we...
So that Navy slogan, join the Navy, see the world, was you lived out?
Absolutely. I spent one period of time, 17 months, away from, and with only 30 days in the States, in a 17-month period between ships, different ships.
And what was your responsibility on the ship?
Electrician. I was a electrician's mate. And that was a critical rate in those days, and ships that were staying in port didn't need me. Mm-hmm. So you were transferred to ships that were going out. So I transferred from the Intrepid, where I first picked up that Intrepid in Athens in 1956, and brought it back. And then we went to the Navy Yard in Brooklyn and put on a candid flight deck, angled deck, and a hurricane bow, closed up the bow. It was an Essex class carrier. And then took that to Cuba for 3 months. In '57, took it to the North Atlantic for 3 months. Came back from there and was transferred to a seaplane tender, looked like a Coast Guard cutter. And we took that to Cuba again for 3 months for qualifications, and then we took that to the Persian Gulf and spent that time until August of the following year when we got back from the Persian Gulf, and then I just transferred back to the Intrepid, actually. And my responsibility there was the aft quarter of the aft 1/3 of the ship in the back from the hangar deck and above. So I had the flight landing responsibility, the arresting gears that stopped the planes from flying through, and I had people under me that worked for me. That's where I retired from in February of 1959.
Eleanor, what were you doing during those years he was away?
I was working.
Writing love letters.
Yes. Lots of postage. I worked for the Philadelphia Electric Company for a while in Philadelphia, and ultimately I wound up at Standard Press Steel in Jenkintown, and that's where I worked until our first child was coming.
Tell us about your wedding, a little bit about your wedding.
The wedding. It was on a Friday evening in April, and everything was going according to plan. We were married in the Methodist Chapel in Somerton, Pennsylvania. And until the reception, as I said, everything was going well. The bakery had our cake listed for the next day. So consequently, there was no cake until the very, very end of the reception after most people had already gone. So, but that was okay. It's just the way things were.
It was
you just have to accept it.
It was a magnificent candlelight chapel wedding.
And I recently saw a picture of the bride and groom, and they were lovely too.
Oh,
She was.
thank you.
Still is.
So, Joe, when you got out of the Navy, what happened next after the wedding?
Yes. We had a short honeymoon because we didn't have any money. So we had a couple days in the Poconos. Then we traveled up to, I started Penn State and for engineering, then Villanova, and then finally finishing up at LaSalle College, 11 years, 195 college credits.
You were well rounded in your education, right?
I was a perpetual nut.
And what was your degree finally in?
General management business. I studied electrical engineering, but after 77 credits, I decided I didn't want to do it for a living. And I utilized it in my engineering background.
In all those
Served
years,
me
you were working as well as going to school.
Yes, yes. I had 15 jobs in 11 years.
Wow.
So I moved in the 60s. You could get a job if you sneezed. It was if you had the right skill sets. Mm-hmm. And of course, NASA had started the space program, and so everything was of telemetry nature some way. And you had to build, at GE, we had to build test equipment just to test what was being developed, because there was no way of testing these space configurations, mm-hmm. which Apollo was the biggest program.
Well, I'm sure that was a fascinating time to be in that industry.
It was. I had
probably challenging too.
Yeah, the the interesting challenge was the development of the S-band transmitter. But in '68, they handed me a schematic at a company I was working with. And eventually, they gave me a size that I had to package this entire design into. So I had to design the circuit boards and the configurations of the RF signals inside a box, which would be gold plated when it was done. This went into the Apollo program and was in space. And I designed the S-band transmitter that was used in Apollo. And it worked.
That's a good thing.
It worked. They were amazed. It worked. First time out of the box. So that was in '68. And when I graduated, I was working for a small medical engineering company in '71 and became general manager and worked in there had a half a dozen patents were issued during that time, and started my own business in '77.
And during all those years, Eleanor, what were you doing?
Raising children. We have 4 children. And ultimately, I went back to school at night and received a secretarial degree. So that was a great accomplishment mm-hmm. with all that was going on in the family. So moved a couple of times, but it was rewarding in its own way. So the children, of course, are very grown, and great-grandchildren are now coming along, so that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they're all in Pennsylvania, and of course, here we are. We do the best we can.
Joe, I believe that after you developed the patents and all, you took another turn in your career?
Yes, I started my own company. I was the general manager of the division that Warner Lambert acquired. And I worked for Warner Lambert as the general manager of that division. But in '77, Warner Lambert decided they wanted to let go of all the other businesses that we were doing with the Bosch and Loan people and other people. And so I was able to acquire those businesses, which became the nucleus of a new company. So in '77, I left. My partner was my manufacturing manager, joined me, and we started Innovative Medical Systems and worked through that until the late '90s. He wanted to retire in '93, and I bought him out. And so by the end of the '90s, I was sole owner of the company.
But that kept you very busy, didn't it?
Yes, I spent for a 30-year period from 71 to 2000, I spent probably 6 months every year somewhere in the world, but not home. Mostly it could be in South Africa or Asia, Japan, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand. We had entries into China through Singapore and Europe, Russia, all those countries. And I would handle the customers. They were always my responsibility. As I was president and chairman, that's what I did in customer service. Makes things, nobody builds perfect products, as we talked about. And so I never met a happy customer. So the pathologist, something didn't work, and I'd get a call in the middle of the night from either Japan or sometimes in the morning at 9 o'clock in the morning of the work, and I'd be on a plane that night to Europe. Eleanor would bring my clothes or at the airport, and I would be gone for 5 weeks. Once they discovered I was in Europe, my various affiliates that were related to Johnson & Johnson or other companies would say, "Hey, you're here.
You're in the neighborhood,
Help,
right?
help, you're in the neighborhood." And so after 5 weeks, I was insane, so they let me come home.
Eleanor, what were you doing during those years besides raising children?
Oh, my goodness gracious. That goes back so far.
Going to the beach, Ocean City.
Every summer the family was able to spend 6 weeks in Ocean City in a rental.
New Jersey.
Of course.
Well, there's Ocean City, Maryland.
That's true. Oh, dear. And just really, tending to the children and doing what they needed to do. And
Taking clothes to the airport?
yes, sometimes I hated that. That was not my thing, so to speak. And sewing and crafts.
And you're a wonderful seamstress, I know firsthand from that.
Oh, thank you. It was an interesting time.
And I believe that's kind of when you got involved in volunteering as well?
Yes.
During those years?
Oh, yes. I served hot dogs at the local school, and wherever they needed me, I was available.
Not knowing it was going to be a guide for your future.
Exactly. God's plan. That's right. That's right.
So, Joe, you sold the company, and then what was next?
We came to Florida. I felt the tug from, I believe, the Lord, and we moved to Leesburg, Florida, built a house in Royal Highlands. We're 27 and the Turnpike, Florida Turnpike intersect, and spent 3 years there. Training is a joke. The Lord I became chair of the evangelism committee of the Methodist Church in there, and then had a real strong service in Titusville, in an evangelist movement the Methodist Church has. It's Love, not Love Inc., but it was I forget, Celebrate Jesus, something like that it was. And they used to go to various churches around the section of Florida, different sections of Florida, and we had Titusville to Port, I forget the Port St. James, not Port, down above Miami was our area of that coverage at that time. And so that was a mission trip that I saw the work of God.
And Eleanor, what was there about Leesburg that you liked?
Not a whole lot. I didn't want to be in Florida.
First of all, Leesburg could have been anywhere else. Huh?
I had an aging mother, and it was difficult coming to Florida. But we had a beautiful home built and activities, and made some really nice friends. But other than that, I died in the wool, Pennsylvania.
At least you were.
Yes.
Yes.
How did you come to the village?
I was getting a Jeep serviced, and I saw in Mature Living, a magazine, Mature Living in Florida, and the village advertised in that. And I said, I came home at lunchtime, and I said, Eleanor, do you want to see this? And so we drove up that afternoon to here. We didn't realize where here was. I don't think anybody does.
That's we have the signs that say 5 more miles.
Yes.
They didn't have those signs these days.
Somebody was wise.
So we saw the village, drove through, stopped to see Darlene Jestang, and it was the end of the day. She said, come back. And so we came back 2 weeks later. We had already saw a lot that we would like. And we
She
toured.
put our name on it.
Yeah,
Right
she
then
put our
and
name
there.
on it. And we decided to move here. Darlene never asked for any money. I said, you give you money to down? No. I said, well, we got to sell our house, and I don't want to do anything until then. No problem. So
She made it so easy.
yeah, we sold the house. It was about 3 months. Within about 3 months, we came up and set everything up to do the paperwork. And I said, well, now you want the money? He said, no, it's not important right now. So we saw Jim Skank pick the house design, changed the model of the house a bit, and we finally started giving her money. So we bought the house, had it built, and we moved here with our RV in Tresca Park. And the first Sunday we were here, we had a visit at the end after church that afternoon from Pomeroy and Jerry. That was strange.
Yeah.
Knocked on our RV door, and they came in, and there we were. It's nice to live in Tresca Park because you can walk.
Right.
Or I could walk in those days better, but yes, it has an advantage to live in the village. It's over there with the Commons and Taylor and all those areas, because you can actually walk through that section of the village comfortably.
Pomeroy and Jerry were part of our welcoming committee that we still have going in the village. Of course, we're kind of at a standstill with COVID, but they were part of that group that visited newcomers. So that was the start.
Since it's now raining, we say the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plains.
I don't think we need to be reminded.
Well, it's
They'll
certainly
cut
a
this
pleasant
anyhow.
sound at this point. So, and Eleanor, how long was it after you got here that you became involved and became employed?
Probably about a year. Georgiana McClure approached me after church one Sunday and convinced me that I should do that. I said, well, let's give it a try. So I followed her for 1 whole month, off and on, as she went around with all her duties. And then finally she put me on my own, and here I am.
And you've done a wonderful job all these years.
Oh, thank you.
And I know firsthand because I was next door.
It's been a lot of fun. It really has.
Joe, what new things have you taken up since you moved to the village?
Steve Watson was pastor here at that time. And he asked me to sit on the board of Love in the Name of Christ, known as Love Inc. here. And Love Inc. was a dying operation. They were getting about $300, $400, $500 a month coming in and struggling with everything. And Love Inc. had been formed some 15 odd years before that.
Oh, wow.
So I sat on the board taking Steve's place, and I suggested that the board was not doing the things they should do, and I'm being polite. And so they asked me to become executive director, and I said, I need to pray on that one. I did, and I took over, and we reestablished Love Inc. as to where it is today. We had no money coming in. We had only a few churches supporting. And so for 2 years I ran Love Inc., grew it up, computerized it, changed its whole direction, and we were getting over $60,000 a year coming in when I left in 2 years later. And it was a good mission.
Well, and it's really grown in this community as well, and does wonderful work.
It's grown from there.
Now he runs the art guild.
Yes, tell us about your art experiences.
Art. Anybody who wants to join our art class can join it. It's open to the village.
No experience required?
No experience required. I was never painted in my life, and one day I went into the art class with Lynn Stevens, and she accepted me, gave me a spot, and then I did learn to paint. I didn't paint by numbers, I just painted by intuition, I guess. And it's been a wonderful experience.
And I understand later this year you're going to have another exhibit of your artwork.
Yes, Chuck Eccles wants me to exhibit in October, starting
Center.
October 4th. I don't know how long, but...
Well, I want to remind everybody to watch for that, because
At the Loping Gopher.
At the Loping Gopher. To wrap up with one quick question to each of you. What advice would you give a young person today? I would ask them where their foundation was. Life needs a foundation. I believe life begins at Genesis 1:1 understanding. Genesis 1:1 defines a relationship with God. If you don't have that relationship, you will never have a foundation in this world. Thank you. And what about you, Eleanor?
Just learn to forgive. Just learn to forgive.
Those are great words to end on. And I hope all of you have enjoyed this conversation. And now we're enjoying the rain, as if we've had none lately. Thank you for tuning in. Hope to have you tune in again.